All right, good afternoon and welcome to the House Environment Committee. This afternoon, we are going to walk through H2 204, which sets up a higher extended producer responsibility program with our legislative council.
Good afternoon. This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. Yesterday, you walked through an EPR program that I told you was pretty kind of simple and didn't have all the usual components of an EPR program. Well, today you're getting a full-scale EPR program with one of the additional options in it that's not in every EPR program. So you're getting the full view of the scope and scale of an EPR program with this bill. Now, Vermont would not be the first state to adopt an EPR program for tires. Connecticut did it in 2023. This is not as simple as Connecticut's. This is more based on how Vermont has done EPR and some of the components of Vermont's laws that aren't in other states. There are other EPR programs, jurisdictions. Canada has largely gone to EPR, but some of the Canadian provinces, some of their jurisdictions, they have individual manufacturer EPR. It's like you don't get to do a stewardship organization. You have to do it if you're an individual manufacturer.
They just have a bunch of different ones.
Yes.
And you mentioned to me the other day about where the genesis of this one comes from.
Well, I went back to look at where it came from. The original request was do the Connecticut program. And then I went to the sponsor and I said, you know, that's not really how we do EPR here. And I want to run it by the people that do EPR in the state, which is Jen Holiday and Matt. And they kind of built in some of the components that are traditionally in the Vermont programs. So it's not the same as Connecticut. And you're going to see one of the reasons why it's not the same as Connecticut when we look at the scale of it. I've brought you a separate document, which Kat has put on your webpage, because how Vermont defines motor vehicle and how you're going to define it in this bill is not like any other state. And so when I was putting this together the first time, Anthea Dexter Cooper, who was our transportation attorney, and I went through like all the different things that people ride and determined whether or not it should be motor vehicle or not.
And so you went with the existing definition of motor vehicle?
No,
A new one?
no, we did not. So there is an existing definition of motor vehicle in Title 23, Section 4. But it excludes things like farm tractors. It excludes things like specialized highway equipment. It excludes things like certain types of ATVs. And so do you want this program to exclude that? And working with Anthea and the sponsor, it's like, no, put these things in as a motor vehicle, but other things like your assisted mobility device, you know, no, that's not going to be a motor vehicle. Or tracked highway equipment or specialized highway equipment for construction, that's not going to be. But your farm tractor would be. Your lawnmower wouldn't, but your farm tractor would.
So is that the difference, like hard rubber versus an inflatable? How did you draw that line?
We went through like who's selling these things, how are they available? And the lawnmower is kind of like one of the more specific. You really can't get a lawnmower tire without like ordering it online or through a retailer. And so it didn't really fit the model here. Now, would a program, a collection site turn it away? I don't know. but it's not going to be a requirement for a retailer or a manufacturer of a lawnmower tire to be part of this program. So,
Suspect there'll be more on this later, but we can
yes.
dive in.
And part of the reason I created the document, so I didn't have to read to you the 10 different definitions of the different things. You could just see what they were on paper. So what does this bill do? It creates a new chapter in Title 10, Chapter 169 for the collection and recycling of waste motor vehicle tires. The first kind of substantive definition is brand. It's very key throughout this bill. It's the name, symbol, word, or traceable mark that identifies the motor vehicle tire and attributes the motor vehicle tire to the owner or licensee of the brand as the manufacturer. And that's important because the manufacturer is the one that's held to creation or participation in this program. Page 2, you get what is the collection rate. The collection rate is going to be required under the stewardship plan for this program. And they need to meet certain collection rates. And if they don't meet certain collection rates, they can be penalized by ANR. So the collection rate here is the percentage of the number of waste tires that each manufacturer or stewardship organization collects by an established date. And then they divide that total number that are collected during the calendar year by the average number of motor vehicle tires that were estimated to have been sold in the state in the previous 3 calendar years. So if you had a bad year, you had a COVID year, you weren't selling anything, you still average out the previous 3 calendar years and divide that by what was collected, and that's your collection rate. The covered entity is any person who brings or delivers a waste tire to a collection facility. It says any number, but later on, you're going to see that there's opportunity for a collection site to limit the number for any particular visit. A legacy waste tire pile is an accumulation of 50 or more waste tires, whether or not they're lying upon the ground or each other, except it doesn't include those that are on farms that are used for silage control and silage bunkers, provided that those are and they're supposed to be cut in order to prevent holding of water and the breeding of mosquitoes. So generally farmers do that because it's beneficial to them to do that. It's also not if you are storing tires within a building, like maybe it's your job or your business to like break down these waste tires and turn them into playground material, etc. That's not going to apply. This isn't a definition that applies to you. Manufacturer, this is the traditional definition of manufacturer for an EPR program. It starts out with the actual person, entity in the state that is producing the product in the state for sale in the state. So that's sub A, page 3. Sub B on page 3, line 3, they're selling in the state under their own brand, a motor vehicle tire produced by another supplier. So maybe some supplier in Italy is producing tires for some brand in Vermont, and then that brand is sold in the state. It's also when the person entity owns a brand that the person licenses or licensed to another person for use on a motor vehicle tire sold in the state. So all they did is they licensed their brand. They still can be considered manufacturer under the program, or they're importing into the US for sale in the state a tire manufactured by persons who don't have a US presence. So the importer that's bringing it in, that's when the first jurisdictional contacts occur. They are considered a manufacturer. And then there's the person who is making a motor vehicle tire for sale in the state without a brand. And then last is an entity that assumes the responsibilities for any of the foregoing definitions of manufacturers, provided that the secretary may enforce the requirements against individual manufacturers if a person who assumes the manufacturer's responsibilities fails to comply with the requirements. So that last subdivision F, that is basically contemplating the creation of a stewardship organization to assume the responsibilities of all of those other types of manufacturers. And you will see in a minute what those stewardship organizations need to do to qualify. So I'm going to skip over motorized electric powered bicycle or tricycle because I don't actually think you need this, because when you look at some of the other definitions, I think it's already included in some of those other definitions. And then you see what a motor vehicle is and the scope of this program, because this program applies to waste motor vehicle tires. So you have to be a motor vehicle tire before this applies to you. So what's a motor vehicle under this program? Well, the first line there, page 4, line 1 and 2, that's the general underlying definition of what's a motor vehicle in motor vehicle law in Vermont. All vehicles operated in the state that are propelled or drawn by power other than muscular power. So it's not your horse carriage, right? Because that's propelled by muscular power, but it's everything else except you're going to go through and specifically include or exclude. So that's what this document is. If any, I have a couple of paper copies if anyone wants them. So I'm not going to read out the definitions, but I am going to read out what are excluded or included. So ATVs are, motorcycles are, farm tractors and farm trailers are, and motor-driven cycles, which is basically kind of a combustion engine bicycle, they are. What are not are electric personal assistance mobility devices, an electric bicycle, a motor-assisted bicycle, provided that this is where it gets really there. You can be a motor-driven cycle, but there's also a motor-assisted bicycle. They are actually in the same definition, but they are two different things. And so that's why you see them broken out. One is going to be considered a motor vehicle, one is not. Then there's the adaptive electric cycle. A lawnmower is not going to be a motor vehicle. And then the special,
Adaptive electric cycle?
pardon?
What is an adaptive electric cycle? Like a wheelchair?
It is an electric bicycle or electric cargo bicycle, but that is modified to meet the physical needs or the abilities of the operator or passenger. So it's basically something necessary for their use of it.
So I have a question though. The main problem we're trying to solve is car tires.
Yes.
So why go to these lengths?
Because in the different ways that motor vehicles are regulated, some of these things are considered motor vehicles. Like if you take some of these things out onto the streets or the highways, they're regulated as motor vehicles. But you don't want to deal with them as motor vehicles here. So to avoid the confusion or the ambiguity of something that's treated as a motor vehicle under operating law is not being treated as one here. So moving down, there's a definition of a retailer. Retailers will be subject to some requirements, but they will also be offered the opportunity to be a collection site. And can automatically opt in if they would like. Sell or sale means any transfer to a person for consideration or for lease. It does not include the resale of tires, so used tires are not subject to this program.
Weird. Why?
Because it's the requirements on the manufacturer. And we just went through the definition, which can include a distributor. So you wouldn't put the requirement for a stewardship organization on you if you wanted to sell your used motor vehicle tires. But you can take your used motor vehicle tire back to a collection site if you would like.
I would.
But you don't want to have to come up with the stewardship plan, right, in order to have a used tire or to distribute it. So a tire, that's the general definition, a continuous solid or pneumatic rubber covering encircling the wheel of a motor vehicle. The waste tire is the motor vehicle tire that has been removed from a motor vehicle and is no longer suitable for its original purpose because of wear, tear, damage, defect, or other reason. And then you get to waste tire stewardship organizations, one or more manufacturers acting together on behalf of each other to design, submit, implement, and administer waste tire stewardship. So this bill was introduced last year. Some of the dates are going to likely need adjustment. Some of them are already passed. And so just to note that, and I will point out dates as we go through. Page 6, line 4 and 5, this creates the program that uses the definitions that we just reviewed. So beginning on January 1, 2027, you get the sale prohibition. This is how most EPR programs work. It's the first thing in most EPR programs, it's the hook. It's what makes a manufacturer want to participate in the EPR program because otherwise they cannot sell their product in the state. So beginning January 1, 2027, manufacturer of a motor vehicle tire shall not sell, offer for sale, or deliver to a retailer for subsequent sale a motor vehicle tire unless all of the following have been met. All right. They have to be implementing an approved plan. They have to be participating in a stewardship organization that's implementing an approved plan. They also have to have paid the administrative fee to the agency. Remember, we were talking about that fee yesterday, about how A&R didn't know what it was going to be for the bottle bill and that they were going to seek reimbursement. Well, here we just have a flat fee. It's $15,000 annually for each stewardship organization or each manufacturer operating under its own plan. Now, A&R likes one. They don't like to have multiple plans. They like to have one plan, but there's opportunity in this program for multiple plans. Sometimes you say no opportunity for multiple plans. But this program has opportunity for multiple plans. They also have to have all the names, their names and their brands on a website that A&R covers. And later on, you'll see they have to have their own website that lists all their covered brands. So the public can go, a retailer can go to a resource and see what's covered, what's legal, and what can be sold. Now, there are two exceptions to this sale prohibition. There's if you're selling or distributing or importing less than $5,000 worth of motor vehicle tires, then you are not subject to this small manufacturer exception. And then there's a new manufacturer exception. You are given time up to 90 days to sign up for the stewardship organization or to submit your own plan. So there's a bit of a lag for the new, and then there's a total exception for the small.
Our daily boom.
And then on page 7, line 1, this is how A&R is going to register the stewardship organization. They will have to register annually, and they will have to begin, according to this bill, on or before July 1, 2026. So I think that's going to be almost impossible. So you likely will have to look at that. When they register, they have to show that they are meeting certain requirements. Basically that they will be able to represent and comply with the requirements of the chapter for all of its members. They submit a registration form, page 7, line 11. That registration form is provided by the agency. For a registered one that's going to register independently without the whole organization. They have to provide the list of brands and a contact information for A&R to contact them if there are issues. If it's for a waste tire stewardship organization, they have to have the list of manufacturers participating. They have to have contact information, and then they have to have a description of how they are going to allow other manufacturers join the program. One of the provisions in the plan is that a plan cannot provide unreasonable barriers to participation in the plan. You don't want them to like, sometimes these manufacturers don't get along with each other. I mean, it's kind of the nature of business sometimes that they are competitive with each other and don't want to work together. And that has happened in the past. But you say to them, you can't prevent somebody that wants to participate in your plan from participating in your plan just because you don't like them. So no unreasonable burdens. And then there has to be a name and address and contact information for a person that wants to join the stewardship organization to contact. On page 8, line 15, you get the stewardship organization's requirements. They have to qualify to be a waste tire stewardship organization. They have to commit to assume the responsibilities and obligations and liabilities of all of the manufacturers that are participating in their organization. As we just discussed, page 9, line 1 and 2, they can't create unreasonable barriers for participation by other manufacturers. They've got to maintain that website that lists all manufacturers and brands that are covered by their stewardship organization. And they have to register with the secretary as we just walked through under 7605. Then you get to the plan. Yay, this is like the real stewardship organization plan. It's like everything that you need in it is in this plan. Unlike yesterday where we didn't know what everything needed to be in the plan. This plan has it all. You have to have the list of manufacturers and brands, and you have to have contact information for them, and you have to have all of the brands of motor vehicle tires covered by the plan. You have to, on page 10, provide for free collection of waste tires. Each stewardship plan shall provide for the collection of waste tires from a covered entities, and the covered entity, remember, is any person who's bringing any amount of waste tires. They have to provide that at no cost to the covered entities, and they cannot refuse collection of a waste tire that's based on a brand or manufacturer that's not in their plan. So they can't say, oh, Bridgestone, they're not part of our plan, we don't collect them. No, they have to collect them. They have to provide the convenient collection location. Yesterday, you were looking at what's one of the main points of the plan yesterday. Here, it's 2 collection points per county. They have to provide for retailers to be collection points. So if a retailer wants, they can participate as a collection. They also have to allow municipalities to opt in or solid waste management districts to opt in. Remember, these programs like to use existing infrastructure. Where is the existing infrastructure for collection of tires right now? It's at your tire dealers, it's at your solid waste dumps and solid waste transfer facilities. And so why prevent them from being part of the program? Let them be part of the program. And then you see page 10, line 13 through 15, provide at a minimum in each county of the state, not fewer than 2 collection facilities that provide for the collection of waste tires throughout the year. All collection facilities have to be specified in the plan. They have to provide for acceptance from a covered entity of up to 10 waste tires per visit, but a collection facility may agree to accept more than 12 waste tires. So remember, the covered entity is any person bringing any number. Well, the collection facility doesn't have to accept any number. They can, but they don't have to. Maybe if you show up at your retailer and it's a small tire store, they're like, I can't take your 50 tires for you. You know, I don't have space for your 50 tires. I'll take 12, but I'm not going to take 50. But then you might go to the solid waste management district and they will like, yeah, we'll take all of your 50. So opportunity, but also recognizing realities of the spatial constraints for some of the collection facilities.
Representative Austin.
So if they have 50 tires and they go to someplace and they can only drop off 20, do they drive around looking for another?
They could.
I mean, does that place that takes the tires have to advertise, we only take 20 tires?
There's no mandate here about advertising the limits for each facility, collection facility.
This is reminding me of just sort of a rewind. The problem we're trying to solve is these large kind of tire dumps that are illegal. They're more in different parts of the state. So people get paid to turn these tires in when they go to the facility.
Maybe. So later on, you'll see that each plan is supposed to have a way for dealing with legacy tire pile. And one of the ways that they can do it is they could do it through bounties, but they could do it through collection events. They could do it through other methods.
So just me, I decided to put my own new tires on and I have 4 tires. I'm just going out of the goodness of my heart to bring it to the PRO, or do I get $4 a tire back?
You pay.
You don't get $4
I guess I'm trying to get at how is this gonna solve our illegal dumping problem? What's the incentive?
because there's gonna be free collection sites and hopefully multiple free collection sites within most counties. Especially if the retailers take on a role of being a collection facility. But you're not going to get paid. You just won't have to pay. I mean, the last time I went to the solid waste transfer station, I think it was $6 a tire, but it's probably more now.
Somewhere between 4 and 7, depending on the size of the tire.
Just got new tires, didn't even notice. Representative Tagliavia.
You mentioned collection rates and some sort of a penalty if they don't meet collection rates. We have tire resellers, people who ship out of state and out of the country. Tires that are still reusable. How do you justify penalizing one of these PROs for not meeting their collection rates if these tires are either being reused or recycled somewhere else?
That'll be part of their collection rate. That will be designated as collected, and then they have to identify later on how they were disposed of, the disposition of them. And this doesn't really preclude disposition. You can sell them to burn. You can't burn them.
You're saying that only if you're a PRO and you were doing this, then you would be able to apply it to your collection rate.
Yeah,
Talking about the guys who are right now taking tires.
They don't have a collection rate. They're not a PRO.
right. They won't be a manufacturer, so they wouldn't be subject to this program. If they want to continue doing that, if they even want to say to the PRO, this SO, hey, we'll collect for you. We'll be one of your collectors and we'll take it wherever we take it, sell it to wherever.
It almost sounds like the PRO would need to collaborate somehow with some of these guys who are shipping them.
Sure.
Because they would miss their collection rates for sure.
And that's how some of these programs work, like trying to think of a good one. Well, the bottle bill is a good one. There's a market there for some of those collected materials. And so people have entered that market to collect and resell on the market. And so how they become part of that PRO is like, that's part of how that PRO is gonna be rolled out. It's like, how are they integrated or not into the program? And how would people that are already collecting be integrated into the program? I know what you're talking about. It's the guys with the big 350s and the cages, that drive around.
And they take them and they load them into shipping containers and they send them to
Right.
third world countries that buy them because they run until the cord pops out. Sorry, but it's a fact.
Need in the market.
But that's still a possibility. There's no prohibition of that here. Remember, this doesn't apply to used tires. Doesn't apply to used tires. So I think you are at the bottom of page 10, line 19, the legacy waste tire pile response requirement. So each plan for an SO or an independent manufacturer needs to propose a method of collecting tires from or eliminating legacy waste tire piles in the state. Proposed methods can include financial payments to property owners, just like, hey, we will just collect all of those from you and we'll pay you money to collect them from your property. It can includes bounties on collection or other incentives, so they could get creative with how they would address legacy waste tire piles.
Representative Chapin.
Having worked for a solid waste district and managing programs to collect waste tires, I appreciate this section. I'm curious about the word legacy. I noticed in the definition that it doesn't actually have like, I think of legacy and I think of only things that were there as of a certain date. And I noticed that was not in the definition. And so I'm just curious. It seems like if in the future, especially if there's not well, there's a financial incentive now that there's no longer a cost to dispose of your tires in this system, there's still not an incentive to bring so if you're far away, I can still imagine people unloading tires into the future. And so it sounds like this is created such that a pile that started after this was passed and after the PRO was set up could still be considered a legacy waste tire pile, or was that not the intention?
I think it's the intention that wherever waste tires are and wherever they're created before or after the effective date of this, that this program could be used to do that. You know, if I'm a manufacturer SO trying to reach my collection rate, that's might be low hanging fruit. I think the legacy term is it's a legacy. It really is. It's from the prior use of it, how the General Assembly has tried to address tire piles in the past. And that's the term that was just given to it. And I think you don't need to use that if you don't want to use.
Just say waste tire pile.
You just say waste tire.
Thanks.
So page 11 is the collection rate. So each plan includes a collection rate performance goal. In the first year of the plan, it's a goal of 50% of the participating manufacturer's motor vehicles tires sold by unit in the state in the previous calendar year. So they're looking for a 50% goal for each participating manufacturer in the previous calendar year. But we're going to get to how that's going to be implemented and the potential penalty that can be assessed if they don't meet that collection rate. We also have to report the description of the method that will be used to manage the waste tires. They will be directed to recycle or reuse at least 50% of collected waste tires. So the people that are shipping out in the shipping containers, that's going to be for reuse. Provided that they have to, that the use of waste tires as tire-derived fuel shall not be considered reuse or recycling. So you can still use it for fuel, but you have to have 50% for reuse or recycling before fuel.
Where did the 50% come from?
I don't know. That might have been something we pulled from Connecticut. Yeah, I don't see it in Connecticut, but
I was just curious if it'll be.
Should I move on?
Representative Chafin.
Just on that, still on that 50% number, I guess I'm just curious how that interplays with the legacy or non-legacy waste tire piles. And I would imagine that in the first, once those waste tire piles were effectively getting managed, I would think that that would, for a number of years, bump up that rate a lot. And then after those tire piles are largely dealt with around the state, it would drop. And I guess I'm just curious if you saw in your research with other states any way to address that, or could that just be for non-waste tire pile?
No, I haven't seen that, but I also think that that's one of the reasons that Canada went to like the individual, like instead of them getting credit for collecting other brands, they have to collect their own brand. And so you don't have that issue with, you know, you just are continually year to year required to hit your collection rate for what you sold and what you collected.
Is it higher than in Canada? Is there?
I don't know the collection rates there off the top of my head. I was looking at British Columbia earlier.
We can talk about it later.
So one of the jurisdictions that has been looking at this is Virginia. And they haven't gone to EPR. They did a tire fee instead, which
Is that what we have?
no.
Nothing in statute.
So Ontario, 85% of tires collected must be processed, retreated, or reused. That's not the same. So I can look into the collection rates in the provinces. Every plan has to have education and outreach provisions. And they have to notify the public that there is free collection program for waste tires, the collection points, and how they can access the collection programs. On page 12, they have to provide the opportunity of retailers, manufacturers, and solid waste management facilities to participate, and their education materials need to reflect that. Page 12, line 4, they have to comply with the appropriate environmental standards. Page 12, line 8, they have to have a reimbursement provision in it. And this is the kind of one of the unusual components of Vermont's EPR programs. And it's not in every one of the Vermont's EPR programs. It's usually in an EPR program where there might be some conflict between the manufacturers that don't necessarily want to work together. You give them, and unfortunately, we're going to go through it because it's really technical and a little bit numbing. But there's a private right to request reimbursement, and then there's a private right of action when a manufacturer doesn't provide reimbursement. And first time you did that was in the EPR program for batteries. They loved it because they didn't get along. But now that they're getting along, they came back and asked for some changes to that program last year or the year before, you might remember. And to streamline it, to make it easier for them because they were getting along. This starts out with like, you're not getting along. And we'll get to that in a minute. So on page 12, line 11, there's an implementation subsection that they have to say how they're going to implement this. They have to say how they're going to work with the collection facilities. They're going to say how they're going to pay for the collection facilities costs. They have to not impose transportation or recycling costs on retailers, municipalities, or certified solid waste management facility. Just because the retailer is acting as a collection site doesn't mean that the SO can then charge them fuel costs for the collection from the retailer. It's like none of those transportation costs can be transferred onto these collection sites. They will provide the collection sites products or equipment for setting up collection point and for providing for the pickup of the collected waste tires, including arranging for the management of those waste tires. And the term of the tire stewardship plan is up to 5 years. A&R can set it at less, but I would doubt that they would. 5 years is a generally acceptable term for these programs. As with yesterday, with the bottle bill, there's an annual report and a plan audit. This audit is only a 5-year audit on the operation of the plan. You don't get the annual fiscal audit that the bottle bill had. But you have an annual report that's on page 13, line 8. On or before March 1st, 2028, they probably won't have enough information by then to give you what is required in this report. They have to report to A&R the following: the estimated total number of vehicle tires sold in the state in the previous calendar year, the number of waste tires collected by the manufacturer or SO in the prior calendar year, the collection rate achieved, the locations for all collection points, examples of the educational material, manner in which the waste tires were managed, including the number of waste tires collected from waste tire piles, the number that were recycled or reused, and the number disposed of as tire-derived fuel or otherwise incinerated. And then any material change to the plan, and then the cost of implementation of the plan, including the cost of collection, recycling, education, and outreach. Then you see the audit. January 1, 2032, and every 5 years, they hire an independent third party to audit the effectiveness of the plan and the cost effectiveness of the plan, and to compare it to what waste tire stewardship plans in other jurisdictions, and then make recommendations to you on and A&R on ways to increase efficacy and cost effectiveness. That's the audit.
So hold on, we talked with Matt Chapman today about the different reports and audits in the bottle bill. And he said, pretty much every one of our EPRs requires an annual, just regular audit. I'm thinking that would be something A&R would want to have in this, and I'm curious why you chose not to do just a regular annual audit.
I disagree that all the EPR programs require an annual audit. They all require audit. It's usually every 5 years. They all require an annual report.
You get a reality check on that. You're two very trustworthy witnesses. I think he's saying different things.
There's also, and Senator Brock always brings it up. He's like, what he is identified as an audit in here? It's like, that's not an audit. You know, that's a review of the program. That's not an audit.
Well, Matt distinguished it, like every nonprofit has an annual audit that an auditor does.
Right.
That was the equivalent that he was stating, sort of, I think, making. Maybe I got it wrong. Did other people hear that? What else?
I was listening. I heard what he said, and
You just didn't, okay, so.
I just don't think that everyone has that same fiscal audit annually that the bottle bill did yesterday.
Okay,
Do they all do an audit? Probably. I mean, if you're dealing with the kind of money that's involved in running these, you probably want to do an audit to make sure there isn't mismanagement. But I don't think it's mandatory in all of the programs.
all right, so we're gonna need a little guidance on what's, maybe since we're having so many of these now, like what is our minimum responsible need for audits and reports back?
Understood. On page 15, line 1 through 16, this is just how you deal with new manufacturers entering the market after January 1, 2027. They basically they have to notify A&R, and then they're given 90 days to come up with their own plan or join an existing SO. And then you get the small manufacturer exemption. Those who are selling, offering for sale, distributing, or importing into the state, a total retail value of less than 5,000 is exempt. Then you get the agency's responsibilities, page 15, line 18. They review and approve the stewardship plans. And they have to find that the plan complies with the requirements of 7607B, which are what needs to go into a plan. They need to provide adequate notice to the public of collection opportunities.
You said 7607B, which there's no B that I'm seeing there. I'm seeing the wrong, oh, down there. I was looking at the other 7607. Sorry. You're on line 1, page 16. Maybe.
So 7607B is on page 9, line 14.
I was looking at the wrong, I
Okay,
was looking at page 15.
okay. Page 16, line 7, secretary has to assess the performance of each plan, including whether they achieve the collection rate. If they fail to achieve the collection rate, the secretary imposes the penalty under 7612, which we'll get to an amendment in a minute. The secretary has to approve any amendment and may require the manufacturer or SO to amend their plan. And they have to put those plan amendments out to the public. They have to get public input for the approval of an amendment or a plan, subject to the default requirements in 7714, which you saw yesterday, which may include a public meeting. They have to approve the registration of the stewardship organizations on page 17, lines 1 through 6. And they have to act in a supervisory capacity over all of the manufacturers or stewardship organizations, including reviewing their organizations and whether or not they are acting in a reasonable, necessary, and way that's limited to carry out the requirements of a policy established by the chapter. And that's to get to the anti-competitive conduct. Remember that there's effectively collusion and you are exempting them, not state provision. So A&R has to make sure that that doesn't happen. A&R needs to post all the approved plans to the internet on their website, including the list of manufacturers and brands, but they can link to the manufacturer SO's website if they want to. Page 18 is the retailer obligation. Sale is prohibited by a retailer of a motor vehicle tire unless the producer is implementing an approved stewardship plan, is a member of a stewardship organization that's implementing an approved plan, or is exempt from participation. There are exceptions. There are 2 of them. One is the retailer took possession prior to January 1, 2027. They get to sell their inventory. The other is they took possession of the manufacturer's tire while the manufacturer was compliant, but then they, for some reason, had their plan revoked or they no longer were compliant. The manufacturer still gets to sell that inventory because they took it in good faith, understanding that the manufacturer was compliant. The manufacturer needs to provide A&R and the manufacturer needs to provide the retailer with educational materials describing collection opportunities. And then the educational materials needed to be provided by the retailer to covered entities, basically consumers. And then page 19, here's the penalties for failure to achieve the collection goal. It says the secretary shall assess a penalty against a manufacturer or SO that fails to achieve the collection rate performance goal. The amount of the penalty is dependent on how much they collected. If the manufacturer achieved less than 50% of the collection rate performance goal, they pay a penalty of $1 per tire difference between the collection rate performance goal and the actual number of waste tires collected in the calendar year. If they have more, 50% or greater of the collection rate performance goal, they pay 50 cents per tire difference between the collection rate performance goal and the number of those tires collected. That's a pretty good incentive.
Understand.
And then those penalties that are collected, they are put into the solid waste management assistance account for use by A&R to do tire collection, which is referenced on page 19, line 19, 6618B10. That's the authority for A&R to use the solid waste management assistance account for tire collection. Page 20, you get to the reimbursement and cost recovery. It's scintillating. Again, this is something that's pretty unique to Vermont.
Representative Sakowitz has a question.
Michael, it seems like the overriding purpose of the bill is to provide a convenient, free place for people to bring their used tires, including all these legacy piles that we have around. We want to clean up our environment. And so if that's our goal, I don't understand why we're so focused on collection rates. It seems like we're going to be doing this bill without that, achieving that goal. And so I'm wondering what other motives there might be that would ask us to do all this verification.
Well, I think you have any EPR program has two ways to incent the manufacturer to comply. And one is the sale prohibition. You don't get to sell unless you are implementing an approved plan. But the other is you actually have to try to implement your approved plan. And you just can't be superficially meeting the requirements and then not spending the time, resources, or contractual power, hours, employee hours to actually meet the goals. And so the collection rate is that hook to make sure that they're actually.
That's our quantifiable measure of whether they're accepting tires back as we expect them to. Thank you.
I will be curious what we learn about other programs, expected rates. I mean, I think it's different, like a beer bottle rate of return versus a tire, which depending on the type of tire and how you drive, there's a huge time lag. I don't know how and there's as kind of pointed out by other questions, aren't there? There's other ways, other places a tire that's no longer on its vehicle could be used. It's interesting. I think it'll be helpful to learn what they're doing in Canada.
Well, Connecticut's the one that has the actual program. Virginia went to the B.
I know, but didn't you say Canada had?
Oh, Canada.
Canada, that's what I said. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said Virginia. I'm sorry.
No.
All right, so let's talk about reimbursement and cost recovery. So this is something that's triggered when a manufacturer or stewardship organization is implementing a stewardship plan and they collect a brand of tire from someone that's not participating in their stewardship organization or isn't participating in an organization at all. So they have the ability that they can, on page 20, they are entitled, page 20, line 6 through 9, entitled to reimbursement from the manufacturer of that collected waste tire or the stewardship organization representing that manufacturer of the reimbursement cost per tire incurred in collecting. And so but you can only request reimbursement if you've already met your collection rate. And that's page 20, lines 10 through 13. Reimbursement may be requested by collecting only after the manufacturer stewardship organization has achieved the collection rate performance goal approved by the secretary. they don't just get to collect only the other brands and then get reimbursement for that. They have to meet a standard and then try to get reimbursement of costs related to collecting the other brands. So the reimbursable costs that they can seek are things like cost of collection, transport, recycling, other methods of disposition, reasonable educational, promotional, or administrative costs. And then there's the reimbursement process. So I drafted this, and I hate it, but it kind of works. So the manufacturer that incurs the reasonable cost submits a request to the manufacturer of the collected tire in which or the stewardship organization in which the collected tire is covered by. The manufacturer of the collected tire that receives the request for reimbursement has 30 days to request an independent audit of the request for reimbursement. And then the independent audit does a verification of the reasonableness of that reimbursement request, including the cost sought. And if the independent audit confirms that the reimbursement request was reasonable, that manufacturer that requested the audit has to pay the cost of the audit and the amount of the reimbursement. But if the auditor finds that the requesting manufacturer's request was not reasonable, then that manufacturer has to pay the cost of the audit, and the entity with the collected tire is free to pay the cost. Is not required to pay the cost. And so
They don't have to do any of that. They could.
they don't have to do any of that. But if they do that, and there's still disputes about reimbursement, on page 22, there's a private right of action. So first, there's a private right of action against the manufacturer with no stewardship plan. They're just rogue, or they're old and they're gone, but they still exist, but they aren't selling in Vermont anymore. The manufacturer that collected the tire has the ability to bring a civil action against that rogue manufacturer, the no longer present manufacturer, if they incur more than $1,000 in actual reimbursable cost, and the manufacturer from whom damages are sought can be identified by markings on the tire or other information available. And that manufacturer is not operating in an approved plan. But then they can bring an action against the manufacturer who is in an approved plan. They have to go through the reimbursement process first. Can't go right to a private right of action. You have to go through reimbursement. They did not receive reimbursement 90 days after the reimbursement request. If no independent audit is requested and they haven't gotten reimbursement, they can sue. If there is an audit requested, it's 60 days after the audit is requested and the audit confirms the validity of the reimbursement request, and there's still no reimbursement. Now, you cannot sue an individual manufacturer that's participating in a stewardship organization. That's one of the benefits of being in the stewardship organization. You don't get sued as the individual, the stewardship organization gets sued. The only way you sue the individual manufacturer is if they're implementing their own plan. To page 24, A&R wants nothing to do with the reimbursement and nothing to do with the private right of action. And they specifically says so in both the reimbursement section and the private right of
I
action.
can't imagine why.
They want no part of it. And so it says that. And then there's a definition of damages that can be collected under the private right of action. It's the actual reimbursable cost of plaintiff manufacturer's SO incurs in collecting, handling, recycling, or properly disposing of waste tires reasonably identified as having originated from another manufacturer or SO. Then you get to the general provisions. Some of these are similar to what you looked at in the bottom bill yesterday. The first, though, is not. So when the agency is collecting information from the SOs, from the manufacturers, they will make that information public. And so the public will be able to see amount collected, collection rates, what they're doing for education, how they're disposing, where the collection facilities are. But any information that's a trade secret under the Uniform Trade Secret Law does not need to be disclosed to the public. And so the manufacturers will have the ability to assert that certain things are trade secrets under that Uniform Trade Secret Law or under Vermont's Trade Secret Confidential Business Exemption provision. The secretary can still publish information in an aggregate form as long as they're not disclosing confidential information. And they can also ask that retailer, manufacturers, or distributors provide a report that omits any trade secret or confidential business information so that they can publish the report in whole for the public. With all of that said, the total number of waste tires collected under an approved plan is not confidential business information and is subject to inspection by the public. Page 25, you get that antitrust language that's pretty uniform across EPR programs. They get to work together to comply with the requirements of the chapter. And it won't be considered anti-competitive conduct or unfair trade practices or restraint on trade, et cetera, except that page 26, lines 12 through 16, they can't use that ability to set prices or set or restrict a geographic area in which tires will be sold. Page 26, line 17, this is the fee that the manufacturer or stewardship organization pays A&R. $15,000 annually. That fee goes into the environmental permit fund. The environmental permit fund is used by A&R to pay for the cost of program, usually staff. Page 27.
Can we just talk about where that number comes from and like if we just have one stewardship organization, I mean.
So that was based from my recollection on Matt's recommendation, how much time a single FTE would have to spend on reviewing these collection plans. If it's only one plan, which they hope, $15,000 for review of a plan over the course of a year is what. And remember, I don't want to speak for the agency, but I don't want to speak for the agency. You need to talk to them about why 15,000 isn't appropriate. And remember, it's also almost 3 years old at this point from when it was first drafted. So, you could probably adjust.
Okay, thanks. Do you have a question? Is that
Same
right?
question.
Okay.
Moving on, they have rulemaking authority, page 27, lines 3 through 5. And now you're done with the program, and now you're just doing transitional and conforming amendments. Section 2 is A&R's enforcement authority. And so you're adding their ability to enforce this program, new chapter on page 27, lines 17 through 18. You need to change that subdivision because that's where the Climate Superfund program is now located. So you need to change that 33 to 34. But you don't need to do that in section 3 in the A&R appeal section. You would think that this Climate Superfund program would be X, but no, Climate Superfund program has its own unique appeal process. So it's not covered by this section. A&R can enforce, but they have to appeal specifically to Washington County Superior Court. Section 4, Vermont bans the burning of waste including the burning of tires unless it's at a facility certified by A&R for that purpose, which from my understanding, A&R does not allow any facility in the state to burn tires. On page 31, 1 through 3, A&R didn't want, so it may be the guys that Representative Tagliavella was talking about, and it's like and so waste tires are waste. In order to transport or haul waste in Vermont, you need to be a licensed waste hauler. So people that are just going around offering to pick up waste tires from retailers or others, they need to be a waste hauler.
We need to be a waste hauler today? Or,
Technically, yes, today they do. And it's not like they need, the commercial truck that comes and collects your trash at your house. There are people that get licensed. You just changed the limits for what a truck has to be, and I have to look that up, but it doesn't have to be a full-scale solid waste trash truck. And then last page,
Can I,
kind of Austin.
the revocation of hunting, fishing and trapping licenses, is that like you lose your license if you burn tires?
you can. You're supposed to. You can lose your Fish and Wildlife license for a few different things. Whether or not this is actually being implemented, I would defer to the commissioner on that.
It's a little stereotype.
But that's existing law. And so the last page, it's just an addition.
That is a privilege. I should say it's a privilege, not a right, to have a hunting and fishing license. That it's not related to who may or may not be burning tires. It's a license that but is a driver's license on the list?
But doesn't it align with if you're burning tires, then one of the consequences could be that you lose your fishing, or is that? I don't
Yes.
understand why that's in there, other than that.
Again, this was one of those things I drafted long ago. I think that was in there to really provide a deterrent for people burning, because that section is under municipal law. And so when you get ticketed under municipal law, and there was concern that people would risk getting a municipal ticket of a not significant amount, and that therefore there should be a
Or penalty?
more of a deterrent disincentive.
Or there's a section in here above that, roadside cleanup. Somebody found in violation can be assigned to spend up to 80 hours collecting trash, plus they're gonna lose their. Is that an and or
It's an and.
and?
Don't burn your tires.
Okay, I'm just gonna,
Is that strictly for burning?
No, it's for this entire chapter. Where you are on,
30.
yeah, it's for the entire chapter. It's for throwing, dumping, depositing, or causing or permitting to be thrown, dumped, or deposit any solid waste refuse or whatever, or any noxious thing in or on the lands, waters of the state outside of solid waste management facility.
Number 3 of that is no person shall.
Right. But that provision you were just referencing, roadside cleanup, is for a violation of the entire section. You know, any prohibited act under the section. Yeah, it's a strenuous section. The question is, how often does it get? Last page, there's just a definition of waste tire added because of the reference to waste tires. And then the effective date is on passage, but as previously noted, the dates are embedded, but they should be reviewed because some of them are already passed or will be impossible.
Thank you, Michael. Are there further questions?
Just one quick one, I want to back up a little bit, I'm trying to understand. So I went to a dealership and bought 4 snow tires, and they took my old ones. 2.5 years later, I go to another value center garage, bought new snow tires, and they took my old ones. How does the original manufacturer get credit for the return of tires that I delivered, where that were taken by another location?
So remember, the retailer is given the opportunity, almost the right, to opt in to be a collection site under the program. And so when the retailer currently takes your tires right now, they're incurring a cost. And they either pass it on to you or they embed it in the cost of the tire that they sell to you. Now that cost is being transferred to the manufacturer. Now, will the manufacturer turn around and embed that cost in the product? Maybe, but as I referenced earlier, when you first did e-waste, everybody was swearing the televisions were going to be like $2,000. And now you can go to Costco and get one for like 150, and it's huge. Right? And so, I mean, so the market is going to drive that either way. I can't guarantee that the price won't go up, but it's not necessarily going to happen.
Yeah, it's that audit where they can charge the manufacturer for the tires that they're receiving.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna get to a math question.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like. Other questions, Representative Austin?
Just on, and we don't need, everybody needs to go back, but page 11, the method of disposition. And manufacturer or waste tire stewardship organization shall recycle and reuse at least 50%. The other 50%, can that be shipped to like another country with the stipulation that it has to be reused, or are we just shipping these tires to be stored or sit over there in another country?
Well, honestly, you're gonna probably ship them to Maine because that's these transportation costs, and there's a facility in Maine that burns them.
Interesting.
All right,